Thanks very much, Alicia. Hello, everyone. And I'd like to thank Alicia and the committee from Poets and Players very much for the invitation. It's a great honour, actually, to be here this afternoon. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey. I'm going to begin in South Yorkshire, not a million miles away from here, where I grew up. And then I'm going to go to Scotland, where I lived for 20 years. And then I'm going to come back down to Cumbria, where I'm living now. And I'm going to do that in 20 minutes. And that's the magic of poetry for you, I guess. The first poem I'm going to read is a poem that begins with a childhood word. And this is a word that I was actually starting to think I might have made up because no one I mentioned it to had actually ever heard it. And the word is pog. Does anyone know what a pog is? No, well, a pog, when I was growing up anyway, was a hole that you rolled marbles into. And no one had ever heard of this word. And then a Scots Gaelic poet friend of mine told me that pog was actually Scots Gaelic for kiss. And I thought that actually resonates quite well with marbles, so maybe I haven't made it up after all. So this is a poem called The Pog. And think council estate in South Yorkshire, late 60s. On one knee in the corner by the hedge, Mr. Rocket chiselled the pog from tarmac, a few safe adult strides from cars reversing into the cul-de-sac. Earlier, he'd shouted warnings while we crouched in the road, flicking marbles at the long, low pog beneath the curb that could hold 100 easily. He dropped 2 marbles in the hole he'd made, then pushed himself up, softly massaging the small of his back. Noticing my frown, he bent to double the size of the pog. How could I tell him it wouldn't be enough? I wanted a pog for cat size, trapped twists, silver bombers, flames suspended in glass, flickering against the dirty brick terrace. Those terraces recur quite a lot in my poems, as I discovered. And they recur in the next one. As some of you may know, I'm a fairly pathological Bob Dylan obsessive. I mean, I've tried getting treatment, and it's just no good. And earlier this year, I had a poem in this wonderful book called The Captain's Tower, which are poems for Bob Dylan's 70th birthday. So my life is now complete, and I can die a very happy man. This is another poem that begins in childhood. It's called Seeing Bob Dylan with My Father. We take our seats in the Sheffield Arena. I haven't seen you in over a year, but you still wear that permanent shrug, as if you couldn't have expected more than your family and a job packing bottles that passes the days and pays the bills. On rare days we had the house to ourselves, you'd slip LPs from the cupboard like secrets. Highway 61 Revisited, the freewheeling Bob Dylan, racing rhythms or a simple guitar and voice that lifted us beyond the red brick terrace to candlelit bedsits and winter alleys. This skeletal steel town became a smudge on my horizon, but I came back to bring you here. Dylan plays like a man starting over, writing the songs all over again, and the words we share along with him take the place of things we'll never say. As Alicia said, my second book, Territory, very much focuses on place and our relationship with it. And much of it is set in a tiny village in the Scottish Hills north of Dumfries, where I was then living, a place called Lead Hills, which, as the name suggests, is an old lead mining village. And I'm going to read a few poems that relate to that. And this first poem really explores that landscape. Not long after we'd moved there, I went walking around there with a friend who's a chemistry teacher, and seeing the landscape through his perspective, I just saw a completely new place. And that's what this is about. The poem's called Galena, and Galena is lead ore. Galena. We walk up Hunt Law, Peter and I. My gaze is fixed on the late sun ahead. I want to shrug off the weight of the day to the rhythm of boots on the rock-strewn path. Peter stops to prize a rock from earth. Underneath, tiny spires of crystal glint, an architect's dream of a city. I hunker beside him. A moment ago, this was a rough, uneven track, but now, crimsons, pinks, and jades sparkle in the dirt, tiny jewels scattered on the arid hill. He traces a vein of rust in a stone. Iron, he says, but this is what it's all about. His arm sweeps the village below. A street of terraced cottages struggling to catch its breath. A few rows of patched houses hanging on for dear life. Galena, lead. His thumb smudges a band of black, shining in the last light, so small you could easily miss it. It rains a lot. Rain in Lead Hills. Ghosts dance in the village today, their silhouettes slight darkenings in the gusting rain, like traces of a rubbed-out pencil sketch, still visible beneath a new drawing. The miners that named this village are free of hewing ore in tunnels, trying to find space to swing a pick, envying Galena that is carted into daylight and rinsed in the burn. Now they wring each moment from the air, stretch to full height, bend their knees, clap hands like pine branches cracking, stamp feet like a slate smashing from a roof, sing in the deep bass of the wind in the street, and throw fistfuls of rain at windows of cottages too small to contain them. You're probably already picking up that the landscape is quite desolate in lots of ways, but there was a move when I was there to re-green it a little bit and to kind of plant more trees. But for anyone who's ever lived in small villages, if you're trying to do anything like that, there's always people who are going to tell you that it doesn't work. Planting trees. We follow the fence line uphill, lever out turf, dig 2 spades deep, making space to spread the misty roots. We've been told it's pointless. Too high, windy, wet, the soil clogged with rocks. If winter's icy fingers don't choke them, then rabbits will nip them in the bud. But there's a will to bring trees back to hills of yellow grass and heather, where only grouse are cultivated. Spruce, fast growing, so spindly limbs can lock into a windbreak. Oak for the hollows, and flowering cherries, pink and white against dried out slopes. I wall them in with sticks and netting. None stand more than 18 inches. Looking back from the house, they are twigs poking out of fragile fortifications. The labels we tied to branches with scribbled species and date of planting, flapping in the breeze like prayers. going to read a new poem now, and this poem bridges the gap in some ways between the Scottish stuff and the Cumbrian stuff. I moved down to Cumbria to take up the post in the Wordsworth Trust in 2008. And this is about one of those moments which, when you look back on it, appears to be strangely prescient of what's to come, although on the surface it's very ordinary. And it's set in Carstairs Junction, which is an interchange train station in the south of Scotland. At Carstairs Junction, on the northbound platform, changing trains at this village station where routes converge, the darkness hasn't yet loosened its hold. Rain slants into the beams of the platform lamps like the grain of an old film. The waiting room is small, the platform crammed, commuters not speaking, trying to read the blackness beyond the pool of dim white light. Tomorrow, though I don't yet know it, my car will hit ice and switch direction, and I'll crash on the snow-dampened bank. In the slow days of convalescence, I'll think about the route I'm following and decide to plot a different course. But this morning I'm locked into this one. A train draws in behind us, carriages warm with the glow of home. And perhaps it's only hindsight that hears the wheels whisper south, south as it pulls away. I did a project with a friend of mine, the artist and printmaker Hugh Bryden, which was 10 poems accompanied by his wonderful drawings. He also did the territory cover. And the poems are set in Cumbria. And in both this project and territory, there's quite a lot of animals crop up. And I suppose I was thinking quite a lot about animal poetry and what the purpose of it was. And the conclusion I came to was that as humans, we respond to animals in ways which can't always be explained by our scientific knowledge of them. So we may know what it is that they're doing, but it doesn't actually explain the way we react to them. And I think that's behind quite a lot of my poems. And I'd like to finish with 2 poems from this pamphlet. And the first one is called Horses at Castle Head. Snow blankets the grass, but still the girl gives them the field. A black horse, 16 hands, the Shetland just over half that. She pats them gently before she leaves, her tongue clicking, and forks hay from a trailer over the gate, a blast of yellow on the white ground. Each day, wrapped in quilted coats against the cold, hooves scuff earth and wind brushes their manes. At the back of the field is a roped track, but these horses are left to their own world. They're rarely more than an arm's length apart, each the other's shadow as they pick their way. Children sledging down the opposite hill shout suddenly, shattering the stillness, but the horses pay no mind. More snow detaches itself from the darkening sky. They stay close, warm breath clouding the air as they pause, heads angled, listening to something that only they can hear. And that, as you may have gathered, is one of the views from my house, and this next one is another view. And I'm going to finish with this, so thanks very much for coming out to hear us all, and thanks for listening so attentively. And this is called Bats. They emerge when day has bleached from the sky, through a sliver of space beneath the roof, 2, I think, but they're so fast they vanish and reappear from a new direction, flying in shallow waves like the tide, where they jerk the membrane that serves for wings, tiny mouths screaming to map the landscape. They symbolize darkness, bad luck, winged rats carrying disease through crowded tenements. But they're also flying souls, our last spark, given form in the dusk as it leaves us. In Levens, a whole colony would funnel between the trees, and we'd stand beneath, gently altered by their sudden current. I remember the dead one on the gravel, brown fur coarse as wire wool, wings like a cape, face wizened and scrunched and faintly human, like the oldest man that ever was. It seemed dropped from another world, as if what we see in flight is a privileged glimpse of something we must fail to understand. Thanks very much indeed.